their defeat. He draws out of the word Kumari in relation to these girls, defeats the beauty of Cupid, if you will, and the powers of Cupid. Nandavaju Kumarika Cherur Habisham Gunjanaha Katayani Achanam. So the Kumari, so apart, as I say, from the chronological order, Sukadeva Goswami begins to speak about this particular Leela involving the Kumaris after chapter 21. In chapter 21, they're sometimes referred to as Venu Gita. In Venu Gita, we find gopis who are older than the Kumaris, and they have already been, their marriage has already been arranged. It's either happened or it's been arranged and set in place and waiting for the auspicious, or in this case, inauspicious day that the gopis apparently will be married to someone else. And of course, everyone in Braj thought that Krishna would be the perfect match for their daughter. But what Purnamasi brought the apparently bad news, based on the calculations of Gargacharya, this boy Krishna in his adolescence would go abroad and become famous and so forth. So when you go, not abroad, but into the greater metropolis, Mathura and metropolitan area, I should say, Dwarka, you would have a city and so forth there. And typically, you leave the village life and you see what it's really all about in the big city. That's the call of the big city. It's quite an illusion. In fact, it's all happening in the village. It's all happening in a more agrarian and simple life. And the city lights, and they have a glare that leads us to believe something more is going on there. It's the big apple. Something's about to happen at any minute. You keep looking for it, but the same thing goes on, right? And although we move faster in such an environment, we don't go anywhere substantially. So, given his responsibilities in princely life and so on and so forth, we can't marry him to the village girls. So she, Purnamasi, broke the news. So she's a bearer of bad news, but she's really the bearer of those facts, if you will, that facilitate the Parakiya, which is thought to be a more intense expression of Madhurya Rasa compared to the Lakshmis, or let's say the queens of Dwarka, their love for Krishna, the form of Madhurya Rasa. This Parakiya is much more intense. The obstacles to it cause it to intensify, and the obstacles continue throughout, not for a short period. So those elderly gopis whose marriage had already been arranged, which would include Radha, Chandravali, the Astasakis, and so on, they gather together in the 21st chapter, and they speak to one another and reveal their hearts to one another as to the influence of Krishna's flute upon them. It's called Venu Gita. Venu means flute, right? So it's a showcasing, if you will, of the hearts of those heroines. And so after speaking this, revealing this, sharing this with Parikshit Maharaj, Sukadev's mind naturally went to, and there's another set of girls in a similar situation, younger, although they have not been betrothed to anyone yet. Their hearts were also burning with a desire to have Krishna as their husband. So let me speak about them. So this is how in Bhava, chapter 22 unfolds after chapter 21. speaking about one set of girls, let me speak about the other set of girls. Although chronologically, the timing for this is different. Actually, when it occurs, so it happens at the beginning of the month of Margashirsha, and I should mention that these, with regard to the difference of the two girls, they're both examples in the Bhagavatam of Parakiya Bhav. We often think of Parakiya Bhav as being the illicit, if you will, relationship on the part of a male or male and female that is a departure from their married life, right? But this is one type, paroda, of parakiya. The second type is an unmarried girl who has an affair. That's also a form of parakiya. So we have two forms. So he's talked about the one form, Sukadeva was talking about the other form, in this case, with regard to the Braj Kumaris. Now, another difference here is that obviously Radha, Chandrabali, Astasakis, and so forth, they're all Nityasiddha gopis. And they appear in the Prakat Leela for the sake of the Prakat Leela, which, among other things, well, primarily, I should say, facilitating Krishna's human-like Leelas. As we know, the Prakat Leela also is Leela in which his sweetness and the charm and access to his eternal Leelas and the Aprakat Leela are made available to other people. So while the Nityasiddhas are present, there are also newcomers, sadhakas. In one sense, we can say that the primary purpose for Krishna's manifesting the Prakat Leela is for sadhakas who have reached a point in their practice that they cannot, that as they cannot bear separation from Krishna any longer, he cannot bear separation from them any longer. So he comes. Nita says, Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. I come again and again to establish dharma, to deal with the miscreants, and to protect my devotees. Protect my devotees means from the dark night of the soul and separation, right? Which, as we know, although Krishna is absorbed in his Aprakat Leela, his omniscience, while in the background, doesn't disappear. So we can hear the prayers of his Ragmarg sadhakas. And as the intensity of their bhajan develops, and as they say, we enter the ocean of Bhakti Rasa through the low tide of separation, and then it gets carried out, never to return by the high tide. So feeling their separation, he's feeling the separation as well. Again, so he comes. And so another difference then between these Kumaris and the girls mentioned, the Gopikas mentioned in Venu Gita, is that at least there is some evidence, although there are different opinions about it, there's some evidence, and Sanatana Goswami quotes Padma Purana in this regard. Others have different opinion. Evidence, that is to say, that these Kumaris are sadhana siddhas. There are other opinions that they're also Nityasiddhas, but we'll take the opinion from the Purana, cited by, as I say, Sanatana Goswami Prabhu in his commentary on this chapter. And look at these Kumaris as sadhakas who have entered the Prakat Leela. They have taken birth in the Prakat Leela. There are a couple of prominent examples of such. These girls would be, in this case, identified with the Rishi Chari, the sages, the rishis, who were living in the Dandakaranya forest. Another group, that would be a group. They got together as a group and with a shared ideal, lived and pursued it. Another group is the personified Shruti, personified personification of the scripture of the you know, say the Shruti, the Upanishads, another group. We see that during the Rasa Lila, which will come now in a year, right? Just a little less than a year because it will come in autumn, just before the Hemant. That there are some gopis who, when Krishna finally perfected his flute playing and that Kedar Rag and so forth, right? They were checked by their husbands from coming. They couldn't go. And it's understood that these were the personified Vedas who still had not fully developed in terms of this intensification of the Sthayi Bhav of Madhurya through the stages from Prem to Prem, Sneha, Man, Pranay, Rag, Anurag, Mahabhav. This is the progression. The progression in other rasas will be a little different, but that intensification is there for all of them in Braj, which you're not going to find in Vaikuntha. So it's thought that you could die and go to Vaikuntha, Ramanuja Sampradaya, for a Sharanagata, that will happen. But for a Bhakta in Gaudiya Sampradaya, we see this evidence from the sacred text, from Bhagavatam itself, that the personified Vedas, they took birth in the Prakat Lila as gopis. The sages of Dandakaranya, they took birth in the Prakat Lila. So from this, it's drawn, this is the next step. So what is the purpose of Prakat Lila? Again, in one sense, it's for the sadhakas, where they can now get the association of the Nityasiddhas and develop the intensity of their bhav to the point where they are now have the eligibility to enter the Aprakat Lila when the Prakat Lila winds itself up and folds back. That means that this particular intensification of the Sthayi Bhav is very difficult, if not next to impossible, to develop without that association. I've given an example of the sports world where you have professional, in the United States, you have professional teams, and then every year they recruit from the college teams. They have a draft where they draft them, and they pick the best members of the college team. So the pros are made up of all the best. So when the college best enters there, he's like a newcomer, right? And the game is moving much faster because everybody's much more adept. And so he has to, or she has to acclimate in a way that he or she could not without being in that setting and having that association. So similarly, the sadhaka is thrown into the Prakat Lila and has the association of the Nityasiddhas and the Lila that he or she has been meditating on deep in bhava, and through that has reached the stage of Swarup Siddhi. That Swarup Siddhi is our idea, the Gaudiya idea of Jivan Mukta. Rupa Goswami says, Iha yasya harayar bhakti. What is it? Karmana manasa gira. Iha yasya harayar bhakti. Karmana manasa gira. He says with body, manasa, with body, mind, intelligence, the whole of yourself, fully absorbed in Krishna's service. Jivan Mukta Suchate. We call that person a Jivan Mukta. It's almost if he's saying, these Mayavadis, these Jnanis, they call Jivan Mukti. We don't consider that Jivan Mukti, especially if they have no regard for bhakti, because Aruryakarchena Parama Param Tata Patanti Adho. From that, they fall down. If they have a little bhakti, then they can move from there to their desire of Sayuja Mukti. and attain a in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's consideration, as we mentioned the other day, an indistinct form of liberation in which the fullness of their soul's destiny is not realized. Mm-hmm. So from Swarup City, one enters the Prakat Leela. That's also called Swarup City. From there, Vastu City, to enter into the Prakat Leela. So there may be exceptions. We see Gopakumar. Of course, he was living in Braj. That's another thing. And the Leela is going on there. For those who have eyes to see. He didn't take birth in the Prakat Leela. But there are always exceptions to the rule. But this is the basis. The statements regarding the Shruti Chari and Rishi Chari, the personified Vedas and the sages of Dandakaranya, entering the Leela, pursuing Gopi Bhav as they were. If we look at their sadhana. And how did it take place? They entered the Prakat Leela. So this is where the thought comes from. The Rupa Goswami, in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, towards the end of his section on Rag Bhakti, actually he was talking about Sambandhanuga Bhakti, a division of Rag Bhakti that pertains to attaining Sakya Rasa, or Vatsalya Rasa, or Dasya Rasa in Braj Leela. That's called Sambandhanuga. Attaining Madhurya Bhav is called Kamanuga. They are both divisions of Raganuga. So he gives an example of a gentleman who conceptually worshipped Krishna as his son, took care of Krishna, the deity, like his son. And Jiva Goswami comments, and during the Brahma Vimohan Leela, he entered. He entered the Prakat Leela. The implication is, and during the Brahma Vimohan Leela, that perfection that is required, that development that I'm speaking about of the Sthayi Bhav, reached he attained that perfection. What does the Brahma Vimohan Leela have to do with Vatsalya Rasa? It has a lot to do with Vatsalya Rasa. It has a lot more, we could say, to do with Sakya Rasa, but in Brahma Vimohan Leela, of course, Brahma stole the calves and the cowherd boys, at least he thought he did. That's another story. But meanwhile, Krishna manifested himself as the calves and the cowherd boys. So all the mothers and all the fathers with parental love for Krishna, who had their own sons and whose love for their sons was a Sanchari Bhav, augmenting their Sthayi Bhav for Krishna, suddenly found a huge surge of affection in their hearts for their sons. And of course, Baladev noticed this towards the end of the year in which this was taking place, and he thought, what's going on here? Why are they acting like this? The calves were brought back. The calves are all manifestations of Krishna, and the boys following them. The men were up on Govardhan Hill with the cows, and the cows bolted down the hill. They hightailed it, as they say, down the hill. And it was as if they had two legs, one front leg, one back leg, because their legs were together like this, just galloping. And the cowherd men were upset. What's going on with these cows? So they ran down the hill, and they were really worked up. What's going on? Down here. But when they got down, they saw their sons. They just melted. And so Baladev saw this. What's going on here? What's happening? Gradually, Krishna revealed to him that something's been going on for about a year now. I didn't tell you about it, but this is what it is, right? I bewildered Brahma and enlightened him in the context of that. There's your brain dead bhakti, right? His forehead short-circuited in order to become enlightened, right? He found out it can't fit between my 8 ears with what reality is, right? And this is Brahma. He is the very deity of intellect, buddhi. So during the Brahma Vimohan Leela, then there are sadhakas who have entered the Leela, Prakat Leela, in parental love, let's say from the Balaba Sampradaya, where this is a strong focus, another Ragmarg Sampradaya. Balaba was a contemporary of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was blessed by Mahaprabhu to have his own sect. He was already part of the Vishnu Swami Sampradaya. Mahaprabhu came to start his own Sampradaya, although we do attach it also to the Brahma Sampradaya, Brahma Gaudiya Sampradaya. But the focus in Balaba Sampradaya, one of the focuses is this Vatsalya above. So it's a Ragmarg Sampradaya. They entered in the Prakat Leela, and during that time, as the Leela progressed, and this Leela played out, and Krishna became the sons. And the perfection that was still lacking in them, that required them to take birth in the Prakat Leela before going to the Aprakat Leela, this developed. Of course, all the mothers loved their boys more than they had ever before, as much as they loved Krishna. And at the same time, they loved Krishna more than that. All their boys looked so charming, but still Krishna looked even more charming. Imagine, we can call it Rama Vimohan. Balaram was bewildered by this. What is the power of my younger brother? So he gives that example. Again, to emphasize this point, that this is the, as the Gaudiyas perceive it, this is the course to take. The Prakat Leela is a meeting between the Siddhas and the Sadhakas, to the advantage of the Sadhakas, we could say, but the Siddhas also are able to play out the human-like Leela in human society, on location. It has its advantages. It has its added sweetness, we could say. So these Kumaris, then, if we are to think of them as we are today, as examples of sadhana siddhas, then, as the Purana explains, they are the Rishicharis from the Dandakaranya forest. That they were known to be meditating on the Gopal mantra. And the Gopal mantra, as you know, has three names of Krishna in the dative case: Krishnaya, Govindaya, Gopijana Vallabhaya. So their focus was on, let me give myself to Gopijana Vallabha, who is also Govinda, who is also Krishna, and all that those names mean, and the leelas that flow out of them. Who gives pleasure to the cows? One of the meanings, of course, of Govinda has a number of meanings. That's a primary meaning in Braj, and all the cowherd leelas. Krishna, of course, perfect name for Nanda's son, him being all attractive. It's a name for God. Nanda named his son after God. Good custom, right? When during the Gopastami, when Nanda Maharaj came on the scene and was asked during the time that Krishna was working along with his friends on Mother Yasoda to finally give the permission, we're going to go herd cows. Nanda had to weigh in, and as he came in from the cow shed in the course of the morning, he said something like, may Krishna bless you. And all the boys started laughing. May Krishna bless us. And he said, he realized, you don't know that the virtue of naming your son after God. I wasn't speaking about my son, I'm talking about the name of God. Then sit down and I'll tell you a story. It's something related from the Puranas. Story of Ajamil, he told them. They sat with eyes wide and ears perked as Nanda told the story of Ajamil and how he named his son Narayan. And as a result of that, while he called his son at the time of death, even though his son was named Narayan, his destiny, karmically speaking, which was to go to Yamaraj, was uh, that was interfered with. His path to Yamaraj was intercepted by the Vishnu Dutas who came. And so the story in Bhagavatam, other Puranas as well, about the virtues of Nam, right? Oh, and all the boys heard this. They were just fascinated by Nanda's Puranic discourse. And at the conclusion, they burst out into Nam Kirtan, Ram Jai Krishna, Jai Ram, Jai Krishna. Yeah. So, what was the point? So Gopal Mantra, Krishna name is there, Krishnaya, Govindaya, Gopijana Balabhaya. So, of course, then according to the Bhav, one is cultivating one name may be more prominent than another. So the whole of Gopal Mantra covers the whole of Golok as a mantra that can give access. Krishna name carries into Mathura, into Dwarka. The Govinda name is primarily in Braj, really, and Gopijana Vallabha too, obviously. Now, this is the 18-syllable mantra. This is the mother, if you will, of all Krishna mantras. There's also, sometimes it's a 10-syllable mantra, where only Gopijana Vallabhaya is mentioned. So this was the mantra of Gopakumar, who attained Narmasakabhav. But they were chanting the Gopal mantra. And so we should underscore the virtue or the power, the efficacy of the mantra. It's a good example. They received the mantra from where, of course, we don't know the history, but that's all they had. They didn't have the whole Gaudiya system that was developed by different sadhus over time, which is relative, details about giving initiation and so forth, and what will be instructed, and so the mantra, the tantra, and the yantra, right? The mantra, the tantra is the procedure, the yantra is the object of worship. You can make the yantra, mystical yantra. We heard the yantra of Gopal, of Golok. We read about it the other day. Jiva Goswami explained. But our altar is also with Krishna Balaram. This is the yantra. The tantra, the method, Nam Sankirtan, and the angas of bhakti, and so on and so forth. And there are, of course, procedures for worship in Archan. So this is basically what's given. We'll see that that's given here too. But the Gupta sages and in Dandakaranya, they were chanting the Gopal mantra. The famous story that comes to mind, of course, is that during the Treta Yuga, sages are typically, well, they're Satya Yuga, and they're there in the Treta Yuga also. They may have been carried over from the Satya Yuga. But in the Treta Yuga, Ramchandra appeared, right? And Ramchandra was exiled, and at one point he went to the Dandakaranya forest, looking for Sita and so forth. And so when Ram appeared on the scene, their meditation broke. Their meditation on the Gopal mantra and samadhi. This is another point. What they're doing with, anyway. Yeah. So, and then they saw Ram, and they thought, here is the person, the yantra, the person, the object of our love, who we've been meditating on, because Ram and Krishna, same person. But yeah, but Ram checked them and said, no, not in this life, not in this yuga, he said. Because why? Because I have taken a vow, ek patni vrata, a vow of vrata for ek patni, of one wife, having only one wife. Polygamy was part of the Vedic culture, but it basically largely related to kings. Kings and an excess of female births, and the king being a big provider on a large scale, then he could have other queens and so forth. So for Ram, such the perfect king, that is Ram, Ram Rajyat sometimes. We want the world to be like the kingdom of Ram. Right? All we need, therefore, is such a virtuous leader, a benevolent autocracy, perfect form of government. That was the idea. And kings were thought to be ideally representatives of God. Yudhisthira, these type of kings, great devotees, and so forth. Parikshit Maharaj. Obviously, things have deteriorated over time. But Ram himself, right? God himself as the king. Right? So for a king to take a vow for only one wife, this is a huge, huge thing. And it extols the virtues of monogamy over polygamy. The kings had at their disposal the opportunity to have many wives and a life of luxury, money, women at their disposal. But Ram, being as virtuous of a king as he was, he made a commitment only to Sita. This was very uncommon for the king to do, and very pious. So there in the Vedic culture, it should not be misunderstood, but the virtue of monogamy is extolled over polygamy. You might ask, what about Krishna Lila? Right? After all, Ram is telling him, in this life I've taken a vow, but in my next appearance in the Dwarpa Yuga, at the end of the Dwarpa Yuga, a little time from now, then I will come. At that time, then the fruit of your meditation will be realized. You'll enter the Prakat Lila. So it could, what we were involved in could take a while. Is one of the messages here, but it's worth attaining. If you hear about it enough and have good association, it'll be difficult for you to pursue anything else, as long and haul as it may be. And if you have that attitude, then time goes fast when you're having fun, they say. So the life of a sadhaka should be joyful, even in the midst of the difficulties that arise. And we see that here. Their life isn't over. They entered the Prakat Lila. Now they have to perform more austerities. So we'll see if this Lila narrative here progresses, right? But the virtues, we're back to Krishna. Krishna has many wives. So what about that? No, that's not the case. Krishna has one. It's Radha. And all the gopis are what? A partial manifestation of her only. So she has expanded herself into so many gopis to personify different aspects of herself, so that one aspect of herself can be personified when required for Krishna's taste and fully satisfy him. What about the new gopis that come? They're also extensions of Radha, right? That is all Ladini Shakti's influence, right? So if we look carefully at Krishna, we'll see that he's completely sold out to Radha. And only for the sake of increasing and intensifying that love, which is parakiya, he may go here, he may go there, with this one, with that one, and so on and so forth, right? It's worth noting that the carrier, all the gods and goddesses in Hinduism have some kind of carrier. So the carrier of Cupid, Kamadev, is the green parrot. You'll see green parrots here if you keep your eyes open. And they fly in pairs. They're monogamous. One male parrot, green parrot, and the female, they will bond together and stay together their whole life. And that male won't mate with any other female, and that female won't mate with any other male. So the carrier of Cupid is exemplifying the monogamous life as the best type of relationship. He's always stirring people up, but the virtues of monogamy are brought out through his carrier as well. And it's said that when in older age, one of the two passes on, or if by accident in an earlier time in life, one of the doves or one of the parrots, green parrots, passes away, shortly thereafter, the other one, the partner, will pass away as well. So the virtues of monogamy, an aspect of Vedic culture that's often missed on most people by looking at it on the surface. So Ram told them like this, and of course, then in the Prakat Leela of Krishna, manifest at the end of the Dwapara Yuga, there they are, appearing as gopis. Through meditation, they got bodies of Kumaris, and they got together, and they basically got along, but they had differences from one another. But when they started to realize through discussion that they had the same ideal in mind, then there was a bond that formed between them. Not only did they have the same ideal in mind, but the ideal that they had in mind was difficult to attain. Now, we think that the ideal of entering the Leela is hard to attain, and they're in the Leela and thinking our ideal is still hard to attain, still difficult to attain. There are so many obstacles to that. The astrological chart of Krishna is an obstacle. So all of the elders have to support that, although they can't do it with feeling. They have to follow the chart. That's reality. Their feelings are different. That's why I said in morning reading, I said, it's an open secret, the love of Radha and Krishna. Everyone really knows about it, but they have to deny it. Or pretend it's not happening. Maybe it's happening. I can't hear about it because it's not supposed to. Or I know about it, but I can't tell anybody. It's a secret, so forth. It's an open secret in Braj, right? So it's a difficulty for them to marry Krishna. They don't want parakiya. They want to marry. But the obstacles to marry create the parakiya, which is a more intense form of Madhurya Rasa than swakiya, than married. So the obstacles, they're our friends. We have to learn to see like that. Even in our life as sadhakas, the obstacles are our friends. When we find out who are our real friends, it's often at the cost of others who we thought were so. We had to see that as coming to help us, right? Pujapachita Maharaj used to say, God save me from my friends. We may come to that. Or family, who are obstacles for you to becoming a devotee, for example. Or just so many obstacles, right? Other people's minds, places, things, life of a sadhaka, you may get the door slammed in your face time and time again, even though you're only begging on behalf of Krishna for the temple. Of course, we don't do that here, but in Indian culture, that would be common, right? Sadhu would go, Gopakumar. Krishna told him when he arrived in Golok, right? I was there. I saw all the doors slammed in your face. So many times you refused when you were only speaking on my behalf. You stood up to speak the truth on my behalf, and others stoned you, rejected you, but you did it anyway. You became an outlier in the society. For me, I was there. I remember. I've been looking down the path every day, waiting. When will he come? When will he come? Very charming section of Brihad Bhagavatamrita. Gopakumar, of course, another example. He chanted his mantra, he went there. The Rishi Chari, the Rishis of Dandakaranya, the sages, they chanted their mantra, they went there. You got a sadhaka deya, you got a mantra, you got nam, Krishna, you have Krishna nam, Krishna mantra. This is what you need. How to practice it? You got that. What is the goal? You got the mantra, you've got the tantra, you've got the yantra. We give so much more philosophy and teaching, but Gopakumar didn't have any of that. Of course, he went to different places along the way, and he was told, you should stay here, and this is why, and this is the virtues of that place. But his calling, his heart's destiny was otherwise. With his mantra, he went further and further, and finally attained his destiny, right? So the sages have attained their destiny here, and they've taken birth in the Braj Leela, and they're this group of Kanyakas, You have the Paroda and Kanika, two types of Parakiya. Kanika means young girl, Kumari, another name for that. Here they're addressed as Kumaris. Nanda Vraju Kumarika, the Kumaris of Braj. In the month of Hemant, first month of the winter, they got together and they realized they all had the same ambition. So they bonded. And there's strength in numbers. So the obstacles that were before them, in terms of their objective, their ideal, to have Krishna as their husband, they made a commitment to pursue and overcome these obstacles together. Right? And they met along the banks of the Jamuna. That's the first half of the verse. Let's see here. So, Chedur Havisham Munjanaha Katayani Arjuna Pratam. And there they got help. So if we have a necessity in our heart, like attracts like, we have a necessity in our heart for Guru, the Guru will appear. Depends on the quality of our necessity. You can't complain. Krishna sends according to our necessity. On the scene, Vrindadevi appeared, having been counseled to do so by Purnamasi, who could understand the whole scene. These Kumaris, this is their situation, go to them. So Vrindadevi, of course, is a forest Devi. She lives in the forest. She came dressed like a sage herself, in saffron. Sorry. and she gave them here in this first part of the verse, she gave them the tantra, and she gave them the yantra. In the next verse, she'll give them the mantra. So what is the tantra? What was the procedure? Well, to a large extent, it included coming to the Jamuna and bathing at sunrise. Doesn't sound difficult, does it? But Hemanta, this is Hemant, this is the winter. It's cold out, right? To go, I mean, if it's one thing to go to Dauji Kund here and it's 85 degrees and bathe and you go, the water's a little cold. But if it's 50 degrees, 45 degrees, and then you're going to go, it's at sunrise, or the sun may not even be shining on the water itself, that's a little difficulty. So they had to come and bathe every morning at sunrise in the Jamuna, up to the neck. And then fashion, they were instructed by Vrinda, a deity out of clay, a deity of Katyayani, and then worship. When she said worship, of course, included in that is obviously she gives some instruction how to worship. First, you will offer asana, then foot wash, padya, then argya, mouthwash, madhuparka, some like yogurt mixed with honey and so forth. Then snan, flowers, incense, deep, bhoga, and so forth. Right? The second verse brings this out. When dawn was approaching, O king, they immersed themselves in the water of the Kalindi, another name for Jamuna, made a sandy idol on the brink of the water, and worshipped Devi, Katyayani, with aromatic substances, fragrant flowers, propitiatory offerings, incense lamps, diverse esculent presentations, new leaves, fruits, rice, so forth. Now, the order of these things mentioned here is not, as you may have noticed, in the order in which I mentioned, which is the standard order. And there's two considerations here. Either they offered following Brinda's inspiration, you could look at it, with great enthusiasm, given that now they had such an aid to the pursuance of their ambition, their desire. They've got a guru, appeared out of nowhere. They're meeting her for the first time. They got a deity to worship and a method to worship, and they're confident now. They're confident now that they will get their desired result because the method is prescribed in the scripture. It's been given by the guru, and these magical, if you will, it might be thought, procedures, they actually work. This is the thing about karma kanda. Karma kanda is the path where we are engaged in acquisition to get things. So if you want to get things, husband, children, money, influence, and so forth, as everybody does, because they think, I need to add something on to myself that I can become full, because they don't know the fullness of the self in itself. They don't realize that I'm a unit of quality. By adding quantity on, the quality is not going to improve. I am the quality. I am qualitative feelings I have. Matter doesn't. Anyway, so you know the difference between consciousness and matter. That's a whole long discussion. So in the karma marg, people who are just, this is their condition, they're driven by acquisition. The karma marg says, if you want things, here's a way to do it that's very fruitful. And you're doing it in conjunction with the way that God has prescribed in the world. So it will be a bountiful life. Follow the karma marg according to your caste and so forth, and so on. Worship the different gods, show thanks, gratitude to the sun, to the moon, to the wind, which you're dependent upon for your senses to function at all in relation to acquiring things. So live a life of gratitude like this. It's the beginning of love, to start to show some love and acceptance of higher authorities in your life that you're dependent upon, and come to know their benevolence by starting to show gratitude, which you don't do in lower forms of life or less complex forms of life. So in human life, we can begin to love, to give, to say please, to say thank you, right? To voluntarily do something rather than just by the force of the embodiment that you have. You're driven. Two dogs, they're not going to say, "Wait, you eat first." No, you eat first. They're both hungry. They're both going to struggle with one another, right? But humans can. There's one more piece of pizza. Who wants it? Nobody wants to raise their hand, but everybody wants to raise their hand. Something like that. Right? So this is the karma mark, and so we're inspired. If you want things, follow the scripture. And there's these magic formulas where you do this, stand this way, move this, wave incense, say this mantra to this invisible goddess, make a picture of the goddess, make a form of the goddess or the god. Do it for this long, and you'll get the desired result. And it happens if it's done right. But in karma marg, it has to be done perfectly. Every detail has to be, and you get the desired result. But what the real result of this is, of course, is that people who do this get faith in the scripture. It's a magical roadmap kind of book to get things in ways that I could have never figured out how to get them by depending upon and propitiating gods and personifications of nature that are in control of such things. So when they get faith in the scripture, this is the real fruit. The thing that they get is a small thing. That's what they're after. But they also get faith in the scripture. So they become more religious. Therefore, they start to hear from the scripture that life's not about things. Well, now they have faith in the scripture, so they have a little bit of space to accommodate that idea, right? Less is more. I've gotten a lot of things from the scripture, and I've got a full life. I've lived a full life, and I do feel there should be more. And look, this page says there is more, and it's me. I am the more. And now here's the way to get that. This is Gyan, right? From Dharma Jignasu, inquiring about Dharma, in pursuit of Artha, Kama, now Moksha, freedom from the limitations of things, to find myself, and so forth, right? This is the progression. How do we get there? Yeah, I mean, they're worshiping her. So, but their worship of her is, I guess I want to distinguish it from the Karma Marg, in that in Bhakti Marg, if everything is not done exactly right, but your heart is in the right place, then the result will come. So anyway, they had confidence that we're following a scripturally mandated, ordained procedure. We're going to get the results. We got a guru, we got the tantra, we got the yantra, everything. They have now confidence. They have faith in what is called a descending path. It's coming from beyond what I could come up with in my head about how to attain my goal. That might work. It might not. Right? So they have faith in scripture. They have faith in revelation. They have faith that the way to progress in life is to acknowledge the controlling factors that are beyond me, the Godhead, in so many ways, right? The beginning way, the different goddesses and goddesses personifying different aspects of nature. So then the question comes, well, yes, and they're given Katyayani. Well, who's Katyayani? Here, of course, before we go into that, we should say the worship here, the method of worshiping, the list of the items indicates that they may not have offered them in the right way, but they offered them with faith. Or it could be that Sukadeva was so fascinated by this whole Leela as he's talking about it that he just rattled off the things. They offered this, they offered that, they offered that, but not in the order in which they are particularly worshipped. We should go with that idea because we will think, as we said yesterday, the gopis, these are only young Kumaris, young girls. What do they know about all this? They know everything about this. They're rishis. They had gone through the karma marg. They were in the Gyan marg. Meditating on Gopal mantra for yugas. Now they're appearing as young girls. They're not ordinary young girls. And there's still some distance for them to go, right? They're told to worship Katyayani. They're given the method. And Katyayani, of course, is the deity. But the question will come, of course, who is Katyayani? We have to get to that, right? Why Katyayani? How can Katyayani give Krishna as their husband with her power? But before we come to that, we've got the mantra, we got the tantra, we've got the yantra, and now the mantra. She said, Katyayani, Mahamaye, Mahayogini, Adishwari, Nandagopa, Sutam Devi, Patimme Kuru De Namaha. So Vrinda Devi gives him a mantra. You got the procedure, it includes bathing in the morning, up to the neck and the cold and so on and so forth. Worship the Katyayani deity with different paraphernalia. And they would worship the deity. They would worship like this. They would say, Katyayani, I'm offering you this incense, so that your senses will be pleased by the scent, by the sweet scent, that my senses may be pleased by the scent of Krishna's beautiful form. Something like that, with all the items that they would offer. We offer a song to you in glorification for the pleasure of your ears, that our ears may be pleased to hear Krishna accepting our our appeal, or to hear his flute calling us, and so forth. So they connected the worship of the deity, please the senses of the deity with their own senses, with a desire to connect them all with Krishna, for the pleasure of Krishna. And so here's the mantra, she said, and this will be your mantra. Now they already had the Gopal mantra that they were chanting. Of course, we're told that with regard to Krishna Nam and Krishna mantra, the efficacy of the mantra is reached at Srup Siddhi. And Krishna Nam will take us to Krishna Charan, to the feet of Krishna. So in one sense, the efficacy of their mantra had already been reached, but now they're given another mantra in the context of the Leela. And this mantra is really saying, in essence, what their conception, speaking about the conception they had when they themselves chanted the Gopal mantra. This was their ambition. So, Katyayani Mahamaya, O Katyayani Mahamaya, Mahayogini, Adishwari. These are all words glorifying her. You are the great Shakti, Mahamaya. And to be clear, we don't mean the illusory Maya Shakti, which cannot give Krishna. That doesn't make any sense, right? Therefore, when they say Mahamaya, they say, oh, and Mahayogini. Let us be clear. You are the Maya who arises out of yoga, out of union, that affords union with Krishna. Yoga Maya. This Katyayani, this and who is the Adishwari, the supreme Ishwari, the supreme goddess. There are many goddesses, but the supreme goddess, that is one. Lakshmi, Radha, the internal potency, of which there are many manifestations. Vrindadevi herself is of course a manifestation of the internal potency. It's Swarup Shakti. So they're worshiping Katyayani, but that this is Vaishnavi Shakti, or Parvati, who's a Vaishnavi. They're worshiping. We talked about Shiva the other day. Also, some will say Parvati, form of Katyayani, who's a Vaishnavi and can give Krishna. So however you want to look at it, they're worshiping the internal energy, and the internal energy is one with Krishna. That means it has no desire other than the desires of Krishna, and apprehends the desires of Krishna before they're expressed even, and arranges for their fulfillment and so forth. Bhakti Devi comes to us, right? Bestows bhakti. Who is she working on behalf of? Only Krishna. We say Bhakti Devi gives bhakti, not Krishna, because we don't want Krishna to appear to be partial. Give bhakti to some, not to others. Wherever Bhakti Devi goes, Krishna goes. That's true. So wherever Krishna goes, Bhakti Devi goes. She only does what Krishna wants. So it's a bit circular, right? So Bhakti Devi here now, in the form of Katyayani, they're worshiping. They have a mantra to worship her. It says, Katyayani Mahamahe, Mahayogini, Adishware, Nanda Gopa Sutam Devi, Patim Me, Kuru Te Namaha. They worship her with these different epithets, glorifying her, and then they give their request. Let us become the wives of the son of Nanda. Nanda Gopa Sutam Devi. O Devi, Nanda Gopa Sutam Devi, Patim Me, Kurute Nama. Make us, we offer our obeisance to you, make us the wives of the son of Nanda. This is their appeal. Now, we should note, who is the presiding deity of the Gopal mantra? We look to Brihad Bhagavatamrita, we find Janasharma, the Brahmin, Mathura, he was chanting the Gopal mantra. And in a dream, the deity of the Gopal mantra, Durga, appeared and told him to go to Mathura, or go to Vrindavan, right? Pardon me? Durga is the presiding deity. Durga, the presiding deity of the Gopal mantra, told him to go to Vrindavan, and there, of course, he met Gopakumar, who enlightened him by way of telling his own story, right? So Durga is the presiding deity of the Gopal mantra, but how does that make sense? Here's how it makes sense, because for every manifestation of the Swarup Shakti, there's a corresponding manifestation of the Swarup Shakti embedded in the Maya Shakti. There's a Divya Saraswati and an ordinary Saraswati. There's a Durga means difficult, Ga means go, difficult to go from, difficult to get out of Durga's influence. But Durga means also difficult to go to. In that latter sense, Durga is a name for Radha, as mentioned in the Tantras. So what I'm pointing out here is that the Shaktis, aspects, let's say, of the Swarup Shakti, are and a bas, a shadow of them, are manifest within the Maya Shakti in terms of the world and its, I would say, upadan. Nimitta. There's an instrumental aspect to the world, and there's an ingredient aspect to the world, right? Instrumentally, Vishnu is the cause of the world by injecting consciousness into the world, right? Causes the creation to go about. But in doing so, the ingredient cause, the material stuff, if you will, itself, gets impressed and a bas of these Swarup Shaktis. So you have Durga on both sides. And so with all the different Shakti, Kriya Shakti, Gyan Shakti, I'm saying there's a material and a spiritual manifestation of these. And so with regard to our own life materially, for us to be a doer, for us to be a knower, for us to be an experiencer, we require Shakti. So we rely upon the Maya Shakti. And these features of the Swarup Shakti that are embedded in it, that are a shadow of that Swarup Shakti. Therefore, Gita says, Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sahasa. Ahankara vimudatma kartahamiti manite. You think you're doing things, but they're actually being done by material nature. That's Shakti. You're doing something because you're setting the material nature in motion as projected, if you will, like the glance of Vishnu, instrumentally, bringing consciousness into matter. But then to function within it, the Maya Shakti facilitates that. Therefore, the jiva, in terms of it being an agent of action, can only be partially so in material life. Because for the most part, for all intents and purposes, it's a witness. That's why in yoga sadhana, they think, actually, the jiva is not doing anything. It's just a witness. We don't agree with that. We say, no, he is an agent. But his agency is only partially manifest in material life because he's asleep. And the Maya Shakti is doing everything. But of course, he couldn't do anything without him turning it on in the first place. So if the import here, of course, as an aside, is that if the jiva is inherently a doer, it has the quality of being an agent of action, then by what Shakti will that take place? It is the Swarup Shakti. And if that's an inherent quality of the jiva that's a doer, then there must be some Swarup Shakti in the jiva for it to be a doer. If you say, well, it only has the potential to be a doer, but then jiva goes on and says, no, it is actually a quality of the jiva. It is a doer. It's an internal quality. It's not manifest now. It's covered. When the Maya Shakti is taken off, then its quality of being a doer comes out. And the Shakti by which it's doing it must be inherent in it also. If the quality is inherent. Anyway, that's it. Relative to some recent philosophical discussions. But there's a material Durga, and there's a spiritual Durga. There's Radha as a name for Durga, that's mentioned in the Tantra. And of course, more well known is the Durga presiding over material nature. Prabhupada would refer to them, the two energies, Maya Shakti, Swarup Shakti, as like heat and light. Like heat and cold. You can refrigerate, or you can heat the house, functioning in different ways. For us, Shakti, one Shakti manifested in many ways. It comes from the primal Shakti. So, point is what? That, relative to our discussion, the deity presiding over the Gopal mantra, that is the internal Shakti, Swarup Shakti. Now the rishis are taking birth as Kumaris, and they're being given to worship with a new mantra. It's actually saying the same thing. This was their ambition in chanting the Gopal mantra. Gopijana Balabhaya Swaha. Let me follow the example of the gopis who Krishna is the Balaba of. He's their husband. This is their ideal. So now they're chanting the same thing in a Braj Leela mantra given by the Guru, Vrinda Devi, and the deity that they are to worship, that is the presiding deity of the mantra. She has a number of names. In the next verse, she's what they say, Eva Masam Bratam Cheru Kumaraya Krishna Chetasa Vajrakalim Saman Achur Bhuyananda Sutapati. Bhadrakali, she's called. Bhadrakali. This is a typical name. When you think of Durga, Bhadrakali. So this is, again, auspicious Kali, not the inauspicious, anyway, in all respects, right? So the deity presiding over the mantra that she gave has to be the Swarup Shakti, because of Maya Shakti, Katyayani or Durga can't directly give Krishna as your husband. She can kick you in the butt and tell you should think of such a thing instead of marrying that other idiot. That guy is just going to turn into a couch potato. You could be marrying Krishna. So she make it difficult indirectly. This is her service. She mentions it in the Bhagavatam. Oh, what kind of service do I have? I'm always kicking the jivas. It's in service to you, but I'm a little embarrassed by it because they are dear to you. Yeah, no. Sometimes negative impetus is required. Positive impetus also. So one Durga one Bhadrakali, one Katyayani provides the negative impetus, another positive impetus here. Now that this is who they're worshiping. We'll see, of course, that they'll get their desire fulfilled in the end, and it will be Krishna who comes and gives them the boon. Because why? Why didn't Katyayani personify and give the boon? Because Katyayani and Krishna are one. The Swarup Shakti and Krishna are one. And we'll get to that. There's various sections of this chapter that we'll go through. This is the first section. The Kumaris, their vow. I should mention also that their vow was austere, from bathing, rising early, cold month, and so forth. And in the first verse, I didn't mention it, Habisham. What they ate was only the food that is eaten for engaging in sacrificial performances. It's not for taste. Habisha, there's different descriptions of it, but I think Prabhupada would describe it more or less like khichdi without any salt or spices. Not something you can eat a lot of. So they got very thin. They did this for the whole month, as we'll hear. This is their vow. They fashioned the deity, worshipped with different paraphernalia, chanted their mantra, and I should conclude with this also. The text, there's maybe 6 verses describing this section. It reaches back a moment to all that's been described. They worshipped every morning. They they chanted their mantra, they bathed in the river, but they came also to the river every day together, because as they began, they realized they each had a similar idea in mind. So they bonded with one another, despite differences that were overridden by their ambition and the obstacles that were in front of them to attain it, making a bond together. As much as I say, there's strength in numbers, right? And then every morning they would come in the dark, because they had to get there just as the sun's coming up. So they would come from distant places and connect and go arm in arm in the dark. And what would they be doing along the way? Nam Sankirtan. So they chanted Krishna's names, many names, and sang their way to the Jamuna. So Nam Sankirtan, they got Krishna Nam, Krishna mantra. Here it's mantra for the Sarup Shakti, but worshiping the Sarup Shakti, worshiping Krishna. This is one and different, right? They did Archan, they did Nam Sankirtan, they did mantra Dhyan, they have a guru. They're going to be successful. Now, it's not going to take but a month, but it took yugas to get to the last month, right? Yugas to get to the last month. To the last month, the month of Margashirsha. This month is a month, and I'll conclude with this because we've talked for some time, that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, of months I am Margashirsha. Why does he say that? Why does he say of months I am Margashirsha? Why did he say I'm months I'm Kartik? Well, that's Radha's month, but that's the month of the Rasa Leela. He would say, it's my month too. No. My month is Margashirsha. Why? Because of this Leela. That's why he says it. Because in this Leela, as we'll see, Krishna marries the gopis. Not only the young gopis, as we'll see, the elderly gopis who were in the previous chapter in Venu Gita, they'll also be married at this time. And the marriage will be witnessed by his friends. By his friends. He has a marriage, and he marries these girls, witnessed by four of his friends acting as one best man. Witnessing. It's a Gandharva rite type of marriage. So this is the day he marries all the gopis. Of course, he'll consummate the relationship in the future, he says. That's 1 year later in Rasa Leela. It's consummated on that, but their vows are fulfilled. So this is the favorite month of Krishna. He got married finally to his loves. Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki jai, Gopakumaris ki jai, Radha Govinda ki jai, Go Premanande, Haribo.